Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Mallory. It has been, I think, almost 9 months since I've made a video here on YouTube. It's been too long and you guys have probably wondered where I am and maybe think that I'm not making YouTube videos anymore. I've been taking an unintentional sabbatical from making YouTube videos. Life has just been crazy. The reason this year has been crazy is because my husband is deployed. He will be home pretty soon, but he's been deployed to a combat zone for the better part of this year. So as you can imagine, with 3 kids, 3 years old and younger, it's been a bit of a wild ride. And yes, I did give birth back in December. So that's what this video is about. I guess it's also kind of like a, hey, I'm back, you know, here's a life update for you guys. But yeah, I never announced in a video that he was born, but he was born, he's healthy, and he's 9.5 months now. And he's napping right now, but this will probably be a long video. So sit back and relax. Hopefully, if you're watching this, it can be an encouragement for you if you're getting ready to give birth and you want to see what it's like, glean some tips from it, whatever. My name is Mallory, or if you kind of forget who I am, I'm Mallory. And yes, we have 3 little boys. My husband's in the military. So I've got my notes here on my phone. So our son, Theodore Matthew Nicholas Mayer, was born on December 5th, 2022. My birth story, when I wrote it down, started not on the day he was born. It began actually like a couple weeks before he was born, because my body was giving me signals that labor was near. And I really thought that I would go into labor early. So my due date was December 2nd. That was a Friday. And I really thought that there was a possibility he would be born by Thanksgiving, or at least before his due date, because I was having these symptoms. And in hindsight, it probably was prodromal labor. I've never had prodromal labor with the other 2. On November 19th, so I was 38 weeks in 1 day, it felt like he dropped and Braxton Hicks they changed. And so they started on the evening of Saturday and they continued on Sunday night, they started again. And so I was like, hey, this is the weekend before Thanksgiving, and I was kind of hoping for a Thanksgiving baby. Like, that would be really cool to have him on Thanksgiving. Monday, I didn't have any cramps, which was kind of a bummer to me. And then I had a prenatal appointment on that Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and I was only 1 centimeter dilated. Totally normal. You know, some ladies at that stage of the game don't even get checked for dilation because it really doesn't tell you anything. So I was full term the day after Thanksgiving. So I was 39 weeks and I did some curb walking to try to open up my pelvis. And then in the late afternoon of Saturday, November 26th, I began to lose my mucus plug. So that's another sign. Again, like if you're a first-time mom and you haven't gone through all this, that is a sign that your body is preparing for labor, but it doesn't mean that labor is necessarily imminent. It could, but not necessarily. So I did more curb walking that on Sunday. November 30th, I was supposed to have my 39-week prenatal appointment, but we had to move it to Friday, which was my due date, because Max needed a last-minute doctor's appointment. So then around this time, I started dealing with some fear around labor. I was watching videos about, preparing for labor, like natural labor, because, again, just like with Gus, Max was a C-section and kind of emergent C-section. Gus was a VBAC, unmedicated, and I wanted to have the same with Teddy. I wanted to have a second VBAC, unmedicated. With Gus, the hardest part was during transition, and when I got really nauseous and vomited, I just didn't want that to happen again. And I had been watching videos around this time, like just trying to prepare myself mentally, and watching the videos actually was making me more nervous. I wasn't afraid of the pain of labor, I was afraid of the nauseated stuff. So I stopped watching videos. Maybe I went back to them, but at that time I knew, okay, I need to stop educating myself. I just need to focus on the present and not watch other people. So then it was my due date and I went to what was technically my 39-week appointment, but it was I was 40 weeks, and my doctor checked me and I got some encouraging news. So I was 3 centimeters dilated, 75% effaced, and Teddy was at a -2 station. So that means that the baby's head is starting to engage in the pelvis. Not totally engaged, like it could still move a little bit, but starting to, starting to come down. So that day I kind of treated myself. I went and got a fancy coffee. I went to the Adoration Chapel all by myself. It was a really lovely morning after going to my appointment. And then later in the day, we all went on a walk. It was actually quite warm that day. We went on the walk on the university campus here, and we went and got ice cream. We got brunch before that. So it was really nice. It was kind of like a celebratory day for my due date. So then that night, on the night of my due date, I started having, I guess you would call them pseudo contractions, because they weren't Braxton Hicks, but they were not real contractions. But I am convinced that they were dilating and effacing me. I am convinced, and bringing baby down. But then they went away. So like I said, this kind of prodromal labor went on and on. Saturday went by. Sunday we went to mass on Saturday evening. Sunday the 4th was really relaxing. So the 4th, this is the day before I went to labor. And then later in the day, it seemed like the second half of the day, I was like constantly hungry and wanting to eat carbs. And so it just seemed like I was snacking and snacking and snacking, especially on carbs. So in hindsight, I think my body knew that I needed to carb load, basically, like athletes carb load before a marathon. Well, I guess I was carb loading before the marathon of labor and delivery. So I went to bed super late that night. It was like 2 a.m. It was later than I should have, but we had a really relaxing evening. We lit our Advent wreath and prayed, lit incense, and prayed together as a family with Mark's parents. So then, so finally we're at birthday, Teddy's birthday. So it was Monday, December 5th, and it was around like 6:20 or 6:25 a.m. I didn't look at the clock, but I got up to go to the bathroom, and then I went back into bed. Like, I felt normal. Mark was sleeping, but I had a hard time going back to sleep. So I decided, as I lay there, like trying to go back to sleep, I decided I would like daydream about what would happen if I accidentally gave birth at home. Like if birth went really, really fast and I ended up giving birth in our bedroom or whatever. So I was visualizing, like, okay, what would happen? I had, read articles about, things to have on hand and stuff. And after maybe about 5 minutes of doing that, I had my first timeable contraction. But I continued to lay on my side. I didn't look at my phone. I was just laying in there in the dark. And I waited to see if there'd be another one. Like, maybe this was just a random thing, but we'll see if there's another one. And I did have a couple more. And so then I looked at my phone, and it was 6:35. So maybe I'd gotten up around like 6:15. I don't know. But it was sometime after 6 a.m. And then I started timing them at that point. And they kept happening at regular intervals, like every 5 to 10 minutes. By 7 a.m., I was like, yep, today's the day. Like, this is real labor. I'm going into labor. But Mark was still sleeping, and I did not want to wake him up and like get him going, because I wanted him to sleep and rest for as long as possible. And I didn't need any help or anything. Like, I kind of just wanted to be alone. So the intensity of the contractions started off mild, but around, I said 7:23 a.m., I had a contraction that I indicated in my contraction app as moderate. So it was a little more painful, a little more intense. And I decided to tell Mark, just so he would have a heads up, just FYI, this is happening, today's the day. But he got up right away and like started getting things ready. So I was timing my contractions on my app, and my contractions were anywhere between 2 minutes apart to 8 minutes apart. So, they were kind of consistent, but not like super regular. And I asked Mark to get me some water so I could stay hydrated, and then a piece of toast, because like I was hungry, but I was also afraid of eating too much, because then I didn't want to throw it up, if I got that nauseated feeling. But I knew I needed some kind of sustenance. But after I knew that staying hydrated was the most important thing. So after every contraction, I kind of made it a rule that I would take a drink of water after every contraction. So that helped with staying hydrated. And then I was regularly getting up to go to the bathroom, regularly going to pee. So then at 8:24 a.m., I gave my mom a call and filled her in on what was going on. And then right after that, I got a shower. When I was in labor with Gus, getting in the shower was really nice. And so I was like, I definitely want to take advantage of hydrotherapy again. So I was in the shower for maybe at least 20 minutes. But it did seem like the shower seemed to slow down the contractions. But then by 11:30, so a few hours later, they had picked up and they were sometimes 2 to 3 minutes apart. Moving around and then bending or squatting down seemed to bring on contractions. And so I thought, okay, like not quite ready to go yet to the hospital, but I probably should finish packing up my hospital bags. I had, done the majority of it already, but they were just last minute things. But since I hadn't gotten as much sleep as I wanted, like remember I went to bed at 2 a.m. and then I was up around like 6, so I'd only gotten 4 hours. I did want to stay in bed for as long as I could, and I didn't want to expend extra energy because I knew that I needed, all the energy that I could get. So since the contractions were getting a little more intense and more painful, I put my TENS unit on my lower back. One of the best decisions ever. If you don't have one, go online and order yourself a TENS unit. And I'm telling you, it helped so much. It was really great. Like just laying there in my bed, like it was like the perfect combination. Laying in my own bed, which is super comfy. I love our bed. And having the TENS unit, I put on my meditative birth playlist at some point around there, like when I put the TENS unit on. So it was like Gregorian chant, other Catholic music that was very, Catholic hymns. Mark was in and out of the room. Like sometimes he would, be sitting on the floor, checking in on me. I really didn't need much support, I just wanted to lay there and relax and like almost, I don't think I ever really fell asleep, but, kind of like in that just super calm, chilled out mode. And so every time I had a contraction, I would really do my best to just relax my whole body and breathe through the contraction. The TENS unit would be going and I'd be listening to my music, and it was so perfect. Like it was almost like having a home birth without a home birth. It was just beautiful, and the lights were dimmed. Like I kept the curtains closed, and I had, so with our Christmas decorating, I had put, maybe I'll insert a picture here, but I had strung white Christmas lights along our headboard with garland, and so I had those on, and then I had this electric candle with St. Maximilian Kolbe on it, which our first son is named after him. It was such a lovely atmosphere. Like just even thinking about it now, I mean, even though I kept, you have those waves of pain with the contractions, but it was really nice. Like I could do that again. But yeah, I was in no hurry to go to the hospital, and I was like, no, I'm nowhere near needing to go to the hospital. Like, yeah, my contractions were every 2 to 3 minutes usually, but I was not in a lot of pain. And I decided to move around a little bit, and I felt fine when I was standing up, but as soon as I would sit down on the edge of the bed, it would bring on a contraction and it would be kind of painful. And I started thinking, okay, this ride to the hospital is not going to be fun if I can't sit down without it bringing on a painful contraction. Maybe we should go. Part of me thought maybe we should go, and then the other part of me was like, no, you don't want to go too soon. Remember with Gus, like you're definitely not in transition yet. Like it's definitely not painful enough for it to be transition. And like, I just didn't want to make that mistake, but I didn't want to be super painful in the car. So I was just kind of struggling with that. So I checked my contraction app, and it told me that my contractions were about 1 minute long in duration and about 5 minutes apart. And it had been like that over the past hour. So that meets the 511 criteria, which a lot of doctors will say, if you meet the 511, then it's time to go to the hospital. At the same time, I didn't want to come in and be like, oh, you're only 5 centimeters. That's what it was like when I went in with Gus. So it was almost noon, and I called my mom to discuss with her like what I was feeling, and like feeling conflicted, and like, oh, what do I do? I need some help. After discussing with her, I came to the conclusion like, yes, it's probably should go in. Mostly I guess I made the decision mostly because sitting down immediately brought on a contraction. So I told Mark, I was like, yep, it's time to go. Like, he had already put most of my stuff in our car. The boys were out with my in-laws outside playing, and so I was like, hey, I want to get one last picture with you guys before I go give birth to Teddy. You know, throughout this whole time I was totally able to talk. I didn't have any nauseated feelings, nothing. We left the house around 12:10, and it was a bright and sunny day, and it was really weird to be driving to the hospital in the middle of the day, because with both Max and Gus, I went into labor in the evening, and that's what I expected. Okay, my body, this has happened twice. Even though I had a C-section with Max, I did go into labor, and he was breech. That's why he was a C-section. But I did go into natural labor, and I was like 5 to 6 centimeters when I got to the hospital. Max and Gus, I went into labor like right after dinner time, like 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. And so I thought, okay, well, that's what my body does. I'm gonna do the same with Teddy. Nope. Yeah, I went to labor in the early morning. So don't use that as a gauge. I learned my lesson with that. As we were walking in, I had a contraction and I had to stop. So finally we got checked in. We went upstairs to L&D. So then my nurse came in and she introduced herself to me. I didn't remember what her name was. And then another nurse would also be helping. So she came in and they hooked me up to the contraction and fetal monitors just to get a baseline. And then, you know, blood pressure, O2 levels, like all the normal stuff. So, okay, remember that I'm a VBAC. So this is my second VBAC. And she told me that I only needed to be monitored intermittently, which formerly I thought that if you were a VBAC at this hospital, that their hospital policy was that you had to be continuously monitored. And I was like, oh, cool, like intermittent, that's great. And then as the nurse spoke with me, I asked what her name was again, and it's the same as mine. It was Malori. I don't usually say my nurse names on videos, but it was just so funny that she had the same name. That was so cool. And she was super sweet. Both of my nurses were so great. So then after she hooked me up, Mallory checked my cervix, and it wasn't too painful, thankfully. I was kind of afraid it'd be painful, but it wasn't. And she was like, I can't really feel anything, and the baby's right there. And I'm like, huh? And she said, okay, let me get another nurse in here and to double check, because I don't really believe what I'm feeling. And I'm like, okay. And so this other nurse came in, not the second nurse, but a totally different nurse. And she checked me and she's like, yep, you're complete. And I'm like, what? Do you mean I'm 10 centimeters dilated? And she said, yep. I was in total shock and disbelief. I was almost crying because I was so happy. That means, you guys, that I went through transition either at home or in the car or both, and I didn't even know it. Like, I just remember, yeah, it was, I can't believe that I was 10 centimeters, I was 100% effaced, baby was coming down, they could feel his head, and they're like, yeah, now all we have to do is wait for you to have the urge to push. And then you're good to go. I'm like, we're having a baby. Like, this is so insane. This is awesome. But I also was feeling super great. So the reason why Mallory, my nurse, at first didn't believe what she was feeling, because she's like, yeah, I was not exhibiting symptoms of a woman in labor at 10 centimeters. I don't know, I felt good. I didn't have the TENS unit on at that time. It was wild and incredible and like such a gift too. Like, I don't want to act like this is all in my own power, so I'll just insert this little story here. I got this icon print of Our Lady Helper in Childbirth, and it had a prayer on the back, you know, for a good, a peaceful delivery, labor and delivery. I would pray that prayer every night. And, you know, so I had a devotion to Our Lady Helper in Childbirth, and I always had this icon sitting next to my bed. And so that was one of the things that I brought with me to the hospital, was this icon print. Throughout the whole time, like throughout the entire labor process, you know, it was like very palpable, like Our Lady and Jesus were totally right there helping me. She totally interceded for me, and God answered my prayers for peaceful, not precipitous birth, but you know, just one that just flowed. It really was a dream birth. Okay, so I'm getting off on a tangent. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So yeah, so I had been laboring just a little bit over 6 hours at that point, and I was 10 centimeters. It was almost 1:00 p.m. and Mark texted a Facebook group that I created. Like, so he said, Mallory's 10 centimeters, baby is coming soon. My mom was shocked, but and she asked like, oh, has our water broken yet? And I said, no, my water has not broken, and I am not allowing them to artificially rupture my membranes, aka break water, because I did that with Gus, and that's when I vomited, and it was just awful, and the sensation was weird. It was just gross. I'm gonna wait as long as I have to, right? All right, I have a visitor here. This is Max. Look at how much older Max looks. He just got a haircut yesterday. So then the OB a little bit after that, the OB on call came in, and it was not my doctor, unfortunately. Like, she didn't get to deliver me. And oh, I had also given my nurse, Malori, a copy of my birth preferences, and she said, cool, we can honor everything except for getting in the birth tub. Because so my hospital has, now that like COVID restrictions are pretty much gone, my hospital has not birthing tubs, but labor tubs. But if you're 10 centimeters dilated and you're getting ready to push, they don't want you getting in the tub. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So then the doctor checked my dilation and the baby station. He was either a 0 or a +1. So like coming down, not quite at the time to push yet, but he had come down. So then after I had been monitored for a little while, my nurses said that I could get off the monitor and walk around, and I needed to pee again, so I did that. Coming off the monitor, unfortunately, doesn't mean, that only means getting unhooked from the wires, at least it does in this hospital. It didn't mean getting the bands taken off, but they, for some reason, were not nearly as tight as they were with Gus. That was something that really contributed to my pain in labor with Gus, was how tight the monitors were on my belly. So I stood by the side of the bed for a little while, and so every time I would get a contraction, I would lean over the bed, or sometimes I'd lean on Mark, like he was sitting on a chair, and I'd lean over his back. They still were not unbearably painful. They never got to be as painful as they were with Gus. With Gus, it felt like I really needed a lot of physical support from Mark. But yeah, I did not need much physical support from him. Definitely like emotional support, his presence there, absolutely. But yeah, it just wasn't a need. And that kind of taught me, like, every birth is different. Like, every birth you just need something it's going to be a little different. You have different needs for each birth. So, oh, and then something else that was really great is my nurse had Mark fill out my consent forms and sign them for me, which was awesome. We didn't do that with Gus. Like, I was having to sign stuff, and like in between contractions, it was just, yeah, not fun. And so Mark did all that. I had my meditative music playing, and I was looking at my prayer intention cards that I had made. So then I get back to the bed, and my nurse said, oh, actually, I guess she just realized at that point that I was a VBAC, and she said, unfortunately, you have to be continuously monitored. I'm like, okay, whatever. But at that point, like, things, it's not like my body had to progress anymore. Like, baby just had to come down. So it really wasn't a big deal. And since the bands weren't that tight anyway, like, I wasn't going to be walking the halls or anything like that. So being hooked up, it just wasn't a big deal for me. It's like, I thought that would be a big deal if they told me, yeah, you have to be continuously monitored, but it wasn't a big deal to me. So like, that was a gift too. So then I decided to get back in bed. I wanted to rest a little bit, and I wanted to lie on my side with my head elevated, because that's what felt good at home. I also asked for a peanut ball to put between my legs, because that also helps with baby descending. When I got that peanut ball into place, I could feel the contractions intensifying. So it definitely was helping him come down. And then eventually, the contractions did continue to intensify, and I got to a point where I would have to make like low moaning sounds. And then I started to have more pressure around 1:50 p.m., but not pushy. Like, they kept, saying like, let us know if you feel like you need to push. I don't know. It seems like I never really got a very pushy feeling with Gus either. I don't know if that's just my body. Like, my body just doesn't get that push. And I know some women get that forget what it's called, but it's like an ejection reflex where you have to push and like you can't stop it. I don't really get that. And then the doctor came in and did another cervical check, and I was a +2 station, so all I had to get was to +3 and then I could push. During contractions, I was very focused, focused inward, but then in between contractions, I was talking, chatting, smiling, laughing, texting in the Facebook Messenger group. My mom was like, I can't believe you're actually like in here texting. Mark had set up the Divine Mercy image across from my bed so I could see it, or I had Our Lady Hillborn Childbirth icon right next to me. I was playing my Gregorian chants. They started setting up, the stuff for delivery, bringing the tables in, all that. But, there was no rush to start pushing. My water had not broken yet at this time. It was like about 2 o'clock. I asked to not push on my back. That was another mistake with Gus. And I wanted to try pushing on my side. So they got me into position, and then around 2:30, I began pushing. And I only pushed with contractions. I think with Gus, it was more like coached pushing. I was not coached as much. I was just like, I would tell them when I was ready to push, and I would push and they would encourage me. And then around 2:40, my water broke during a contraction and while I was pushing, and I totally wish Mark would have gotten this on video. He said it was like a fire hose. So yes, but each contraction during the pushing, like each contraction was fairly long. So my nurses said that was really good, and to really take advantage of that and just like try to push through the entire contraction until the end, and that'll help. But to me, pushing is the worst part of labor. Since I had no nausea or vomiting or anything. So that definitely was the very, very hardest part of labor, is the pushing. Each push kind of feels like a fake out. Like it feels like, okay, I'm pushing. The head's gotta be out, right? And it's like, nope, not there yet. And so it just feels like every push, you do it so hard, and then it like with so much force that it should be like the head should be all right, but the head's not. And so it's kind of frustrating. But I did not feel the exhaustion and like, the desperation that I felt with Gus. And so that's good. And at this point I was clutching my icon of Our Lady Hillborn Childbirth and just putting all of my effort into pushing. So on the 3rd contraction and pushing through that contraction, he was born. Theodore Matthew Nicholas was born at 2:46 p.m. on December 5th. The last push was extremely intense, and I screamed. I was still screaming a little bit after he was totally out, and like it felt like he was still there. I don't know. It was a super weird like blur. I was still screaming like even after he was out, or maybe it just lingered in my head. Like maybe it felt longer than it. Anyway, you lose track of all time when you're in labor. Like it's just super weird. So he was born 2:46 p.m. But then something that I noticed right away when he was born is that he was not screaming like Max and Gus were. Like Max, he was a C-section, but he was screaming. He was pink. He was off, like he didn't need any resuscitation whatsoever. Gus was screaming too, but Teddy was not. And I did notice that the doctor suctioned him right away. And then I found out from Mark later, the doctor did not tell me this in the moment, Theodore's cord was wrapped around his neck twice. Mark said it wasn't tight, but the doctor worked pretty quickly to, get it off. And then he was suctioning him. And then he placed him on my chest, like right after he was born. And I got to watch Mark cut the cord, which was great. And the nurse did her initial checks on him while he was on my chest. And I also noticed that she was vigorously rubbing his back. Being a nurse, I'm like, okay, she's trying to rouse him, like she's trying to stimulate him because something isn't quite right here. So yeah, I knew he needed some help being stimulated to cry because he still wasn't crying at this point. And I also noticed that he was looking a little ashy you know, a little ashen, like he wasn't pink at all. Like, so he was only on my chest for a minute or two, and then they took him away, which typically they don't need to do that unless there's a problem. So there was a little bit of a problem. The nurse took him over to the warmer. So his oxygen while he was on my chest was in the upper 60s. So they gave him a little room air at first, and then they also stuck a tube down his throat and suctioned his stomach, and they got a lot of fluid out. He had swallowed a ton of amniotic fluid. That didn't get his oxygen up enough, so they gave him O2. Everyone was very calm and professional, but as a nurse, I could read, you know, what they were doing, and I'm like, yeah, something, you know, he's not acting like a normal baby should, like right after birth. So while Teddy was being worked on, I was being worked on, you know, delivered the placenta, and I did need some stitches, but it was barely a 2nd-degree tear. I think positioning really helps. Not being on my back super helped. And then I also got a hematoma down there, which is like, and I think because of that, they were a little concerned of the amount that I was bleeding. I guess I was bleeding a little bit too much. And again, they were very calm and very professional, but I could read between the lines, and I knew they were a little bit concerned. So they got me hooked up to Pitocin. You know, I had the saline lock-in already, so they just got me hooked up to Pitocin. Pitocin can help after birth, helps your uterus contract. It seemed like there was a lot going on, like getting me cleaned up. Like, it just seemed like there was more going on this time than with Gus. I think since Teddy was not on my chest and I wasn't experiencing that oxytocin bonding with him, and they were trying, you know, stitching me up, getting me, you know, doing whatever to my uterus. It was more obvious what they were doing, and it was more painful. But I was never scared. It was really neat. So I had my Catholic meditative birth playlist going, and I figured out what song he was born to. So it was the Adoremus Te Christe. It's one of my favorite Latin hymns. As the nurses were initially working on Teddy, the Seek Ye First song came on, which another one of my favorites. I got comments about how peaceful everything was, and the doctor and the nurses were like, I love your playlist. And 5 minutes before 3, so 3 p.m. is the hour of mercy, because that's when Jesus died on the cross, and you know, that's when traditionally Roman Catholics pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and 5 minutes before 3 o'clock, the Divine Mercy Chaplet chant, it came on. So they're over there working on Teddy, trying to get his oxygen up, and the Divine Mercy Chaplet comes on, and it's 3 o'clock. It was really beautiful. So I never had any fears that he wasn't going to be okay. Yeah, it just felt like a nudge from God, like, yep, Teddy's going to be taken care of. He's going to be all right. So then his oxygen improved enough for him to be put back on my chest. So that was really great, but he was not interested in nursing yet. And we took pictures as a family, the 3 of us. But then he started looking a little dusky again, and his oxygen was down to 66%. So he went back to the warmer, and then ultimately he had to be taken to the nursery. So Mark went with him, and he was given more oxygen there. He was suctioned more, and then they gave him a pacifier, and like right after that, his oxygen started going up to normal. But it was really weird to be left in the room without my husband, without my baby, and just like the doctor's working on me, and I don't have my baby. I mean, that's how it was when I gave birth to Max, but that was a C-section. So you expect that, like you expect you're going to be in the OR for another 30 minutes after the baby's born. The baby's going to go to the nursery. Your husband's going to leave with the baby. You know, you kind of expect that, but with the unmedicated VBAC, you don't expect that. So as soon as his oxygen shot up to 98%, then he was brought back to me. We did skin to skin and nursed for the first time, but it was definitely after 4:20 before he was brought back to me. So it was like an hour and a half before we were really able to bond and nurse. Teddy, the next day, you know, he had all of his post-birth procedures and tests done. He also had an additional ultrasound of his brain, because if you refer back, I've gotten a lot of people, it seems like, messaging me on Instagram about this, but about ventriculomegaly. He was diagnosed with mild ventriculomegaly. I think it was right before 3rd trimester. His ventricles went down to normal before birth, but they wanted to just double check after he was born. And so they did an ultrasound and they're totally normal. Like everything's normal. Definitely like a test of faith. But we just trusted in God. We just stayed in the hospital overnight, and then we were home on December 6th, which was St. Nicholas feast day. And that's why he got an additional middle name of Nicholas. So Theodore, I guess I'll just say something about his name. So Theodore is a name that we've had on our baby boy list since like forever, since we made a baby list. I think maybe even before we were married. It was always up there. It was always second along, like after Maximilian. And then when I was pregnant with Gus, Augustine came to me and I was like, if this is a boy, we're naming him Augustine. And Mark's like, yep, sure. So, but we knew like if we had a 3rd boy, then he was gonna be Theodore. Theodore means gift of God. And he totally is. Like, he was totally unplanned by us, but God planned him and he was a total gift. Matthew is Mark's twin brother's name. And then Max's middle name is John and Teddy's middle name is Marcus. So Mark, John, Matthew. So 3 of the 4 evangelists, the men who wrote, you know, the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, wrote the Gospels. So, you know, we got to have that 4th boy so his middle name can be Luke. That's our plan. And then Nicholas, Mark's dad's name is Nicholas, and he was born on the eve of St. Nicholas Day. And Nicholas, my mom pointed out, he was a gift giver. Last night, Teddy took his first independent step. So he's cruising along furniture, and he is able to stand up alone, and he was standing alone, and then he took a step towards me last night. I know that was super long. It truly was a dream birth. I wouldn't change anything. I would not. Yeah, and I think I hear the grandparents coming home. So this is a perfect timing for this video. I just want to say, like, if you are getting ready for birth, I hope this video is encouraging to you. That is Teddy's birth story. I'm so glad I was finally able to get it on film. I've had it on my to-do list for months. And like I said, he's over 9 months now, but better late than never. Again, it was truly a dream birth experience, and I totally want to do it again. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions, whether it's C-section or VBACs, unmedicated labor, you know, preparing for either of those scenarios. I'd be happy to chat with you either in the comments, or if you want to message me on Instagram. My handle is Black Rifle Homestead over on Instagram. And I hope you guys are doing great, and I really do want to get back into making more videos because they are fun and I miss doing it. So it's just a little crazy with 3 little guys. All right, you guys, well, I will talk to you later, and in the meantime, take care. Bye.